And with that, we should be live, hopefully. Yeah, it says streaming. Let's see what that does for us. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit interesting. We're going to be putting together. Well, actually, we might get to it. We're going to be putting together the Saturn V, which turns out this is a cutaway. It's a thing called 4D Vision. They make models like this. I think they're all out of production now. But they do some fascinating cutaways. I put together the shuttle some time ago. This might require a little, uh, little bit of care. Okay, this is obviously the. Oops, I lose. That's one of the landing legs. That's obviously the space shuttle. This is 172, by the way. Yeah, let's get the landing legs on the alien dropship. There we go. That's 172 for the alien dropship. And you'll be able to gauge all of these things. Actually, alien dropship is not going to be landing anyone anytime soon. Let's actually make this big. There we go. Super. So the reason you need the alien dropship is to give you the scale of the people. There we go. So then dropship back in position. Then we've got the V2, also on the same scale. And most importantly of all, we have the space shuttle, all at 172 scale. Now, so this is actually the space shuttle. Is the stream working? Let me just check. Yay! It is working. Super. So this is the alien dropship. He's lost his landing leg again, and the space shuttle on the same scale. Now the thing about the space shuttle is it's essentially a giant empty tube. Fix these legs. Anyway, the space shuttle is a giant empty tube. All the stuff in the middle there's nothing there. The only bit that's really important on the space shuttle is this little bit on the front, which is not actually that far off the size of the command module that they had in the Apollo era missions. And then you've got the engines on the back, which is what you're going to all recover. So yeah, the space shuttle really was a command module, recoverable engines, and the rest of it is just some elaborate way to get the engines back. So the space shuttle was bizarre. It never really. It turns out once they built the space shuttle, it was pretty. Not space shuttle. Once they built the space station, it was actually pretty good for moving up both cargo and people. But for everything else, it was just kind of crap. If you're just launching a satellite, why do you need crew on board to do this? So if we're just launching, it's a straight up launch vehicle, it was crap. But once you actually came up to the space shuttle, not the space station, it would launch people and it would launch cargo. And for that, it was pretty good. Anyway, the reason I bring it up is these 4D models have all the cutaways, such that you see the hypergolics here, which you would use for the re-entry. So the main engines, of course, used for the launch. This burns the fuel from the giant orange tank thing. And that gets you, once you're up into orbit, you just keep going around in orbit forever until you need to get out of orbit. And the way you get out of orbit is you turn the space shuttle around such that it's pointing backwards, and you fire these hypergolics. It's basically two liquids, and you mix them together, and they basically make a rocket fuel type thing, and that slows you down a little. The size of them just gives you an idea of you only basically need to slow yourself down to clip the atmosphere, and then this is the bit that loses the rest of the energy. So anyway, yeah, the space shuttle was bizarre. yeah, for a launch vehicle, it really didn't make any sense. Anyway, what I want to do today is I'm making this video about Apollo 13, and you need to know some of the details about the construction, particularly of the service module, to make a video like this. And so, whilst all of this is absolutely fantastic in terms of, it gives you the sort of scale of the tanks that you actually need to get yourself into orbit and that sort of thing. The only bit that I really need is the size of the oxygen tanks on the service module, which were tiny. The tanks were, you almost put your arms around them. So there were 2 oxygen tanks in the service module, and they provided all of the oxygen for the people to breathe. So if you lost the tanks, you ran out of oxygen very quickly. And they also ran all of the power on the spacecraft via some fuel cells. So if you lost the tanks, then you lost all the power on the spacecraft, all the breathable oxygen, and that's basically what happened on Apollo 13. Now, it can't happen. It really can't. What they have is, like I was saying, it's a circular tank about this sort of big. You couldn't quite put your arms around it. And it contains, there are 2 of them, they contain about 100 kilos each, which is about human body weight. I'm not 100 kilos, but for the sake of this argument, yeah, your average human is 100 kilos. So you sort of liquefy your average human, put them in a ball. That's about the volume of these tanks. And there were 2 of them. If one of them blew up, well, that meant everyone would die. So you needed 2 tanks. So you had a spare if things went wrong. The problem was that when the first one blew up, it damaged the second one. And it is absolutely fascinating listening to the reconstructions of the mission timelines. There's a website that does it, whose name I've forgotten, but it is, right, because at first you can't blow up one of these oxygen tanks, right? It's got liquid oxygen in it, essentially liquid oxygen. And once it's plumbed in, it's got about 10 atmospheres of pressure in, which is, it's not that much. What can go wrong? I mean, I deal with cylinders like this all the time with hundreds of bars of atmosphere. You sort of, you tighten them up, and that's it. They're basically good in perpetuity. They can't blow up. It is one of the most reliable things that you can have. However, one of them did actually blow up on Apollo 13 for more or less the same reasons that the crew of Apollo 1 actually all died. Stuff burns incredibly well in pure oxygen. They blew up one of the tanks, and the second one is damaged. So when you're listening to the audio of all this, you hear very quickly that they're speculating that they've lost one of their oxygen tanks, but they don't really believe it because there's no way that can happen. And then, the mission is instantly screwed, right? It is instant desperation stuff that they're worried that they're going to lose all contact with the spacecraft, and then they can't do anything. Ground control is essentially wasted space after that. And then, like I was saying, they've got 2 of these oxygen tanks. Then the pressure on the second tank starts dropping, but it drops slowly. It takes about an hour for this thing to drop down. So they have an absolute ticking clock on all of this. Now, it turns out, of course, that, let me get one of these service modules. Here we go. So this is your typical service module. This is not the same scale as all the others. This is 132, I think. So, but this is the bit where the people are, and it's 6 cubic meters. So your average person is 2 meters tall-ish. they're not. They're about 1 point something, but we'll call them 2 meters tall. And a meter is about this sort of size. So for each crew member, they can stand up in a cube. That's roughly the volume that they have per person in the service module. Or the command module. Command module's the bit on the top, service module's the bit underneath. And so if you're in a sealed box like that, how long does it take before you run out of oxygen or the carbon dioxide poisons you? And it's a fairly simple calculation to do. The guys who were designing these missions had worked it all out very early on. They did all these sort of calorific studies on humans to work out that your average human breathes in about a kilogram of oxygen per day and breathes out about a kilogram of carbon dioxide per day. So that means that for every day of the mission, you need a kilo per person, so 3 kilos per day, and the mission's going to be, I don't know, let's say 10 days. So you need 30 kilos of oxygen just for the people to breathe. And then you've got to run the power for the spacecraft. The power for the spacecraft is also generated by these same oxygen tanks. So I remember what I was saying, that the oxygen tanks, they have like 100 kilos and they got 2 of them. So a relatively modest amount of the oxygen here goes to actually keeping the people alive. Chris. Thank you for the super chat, Chris. Glad you enjoyed the Why Do People Laugh at Creationist series. I keep on meaning to revisit those. There's one that I've been meaning to make for years. Anyway, it turns out that, so if you lose your oxygen, how long before you run out of oxygen? So you're now just got to imagine your average guy, partial pressure of oxygen is, actually no, let's do the carbon dioxide calculation because that's easier. You've got 3 people breathing out a kilo of carbon dioxide per day, so that's 3 kilos per day. And density of solid carbon dioxide, if you take all the carbon dioxide that these people have breathed out in a day and you solidify it into a block, it's about 3 kilos. And density of carbon dioxide is 2 to 3, so it's about a 1 liter. Oh god, I hate to do this. So that's about the volume of, yes, it is gin. That's about the volume of carbon dioxide that 3 people will breathe out in a day if you solidify it into a block. And when you turn that block into a gas, then the increase in volume is about a factor of 1,000. So a litre of CO2 will make a cubic metre of CO2 gas. The volume of this, you'll recall, was 6 cubic meters, which basically it gives you a partial pressure of 1/6 of an atmosphere, which is 16%. Carbon dioxide is fatal at about 10%. So in way less than a day, if you lose the power to run your filters on this, everyone is dead in like 10 hours, probably significantly less. So it's the buildup of carbon dioxide kills you way before the lack of oxygen kills you. Anyway, so yeah, for this video, I need a model which actually shows you where the oxygen tanks are on the Apollo mission. So I've got that one, which is a cutaway. So these are nice because the 4D versions, they're all nicely colored and everything. I also got this thing, so Dragon also make a load of these Apollo mission models. They've got one specifically dedicated to the disaster, where you can see, where are we? Yeah, there we go. There's the 3 fuel cells and the 2 oxygen tanks just there. And it's crazy when you look at it. One minor problem with that, and they're all dead. I've got a question comes in. What do you think of recent NASA experiments producing oxygen on Mars? It's fine. The MOXIE experiment, they basically take carbon dioxide and you heat it. You heat it fairly aggressively with some catalysts, and you create oxygen and carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide, of course, is desperately poisonous, but none of that really matters, because you're going to flush that out into the thin Martian atmosphere, and if you get exposed to the Martian atmosphere, you've got much bigger problems than the toxicity of carbon monoxide. But yeah, carbon monoxide, the production of oxygen on Mars, yeah, that's fine. Right, so I am going to have to get rid of my my V2. Another question comes in. Just checking, are you still staying in the Czech Republic? Yes, I still am in the Czech Republic, which was until recently the most infected country on the planet. Now it's actually going down. Like virtually everywhere in Europe, it's going down convincingly, going down rapidly, and looks like it's going down to stay. You got to be a bit careful. It did this time last year when we came around to summer. But if you take a look at the world coronavirus cases, they're still ticking up, and it's almost entirely because of India. And India looks like they're kind of plateauing out at a third of a million cases per day or something. Anyway, but before we get on, that is, by the way, that is the Alien dropship and the V2 rocket on the same scale. Let's get rid of those, because we will be needing some space. Actually, yeah, let's do these two whilst we're here. So this is the Redstone rocket. This was the first one they put Americans into space, and I don't think they made it into orbit with these. I don't think they're powerful enough. But the Redstone rocket is almost exactly a clone of the V2, but with bigger fuel tanks. The rocket engine is virtually identical. It's just tweaked a little, and they put bigger fuel tanks on it, and it's got a bit of a second stage. That's the only difference. The Americans very literally went into space on a tweaked version of the V2. And when I say, yeah, so the thing is, there's not much to a rocket. You know, you need a way of pumping fuel into an engine bell, and a way of stopping the engine bell from melting. And the way that the Redstone and the V2 powered their fuel pumps was the same. They used a tank of decomposing hydrogen peroxide, and they were both oh, that is nice. Drinking alcohol won't bring back your dad. That's true. It won't. Anyway, right. So where are we at? It's just one of those bizarre things, actually. You know, I got this a lot with the Martian helicopter. Yeah, I've got the weirdest hate fan base ever. You know, this anti-fan base that, and I don't really understand where they're coming from, or why quite they hate me so much. I mean, are they just Musk fans, or you know, are these people who I pissed off at some point in the past? Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, right. Let's take a look at the Incidentally, my dad, this is the sort of thing that we would have discussed all the time. The last couple of weeks, I've been reading the bloody manuals on the actual fuel cell operation for the original um, uh, service module, which is absolutely fascinating. Nowadays, of course, they would all do it with solar panels, but they didn't have those back then. Anyway, right, so I have to get my... I have to get my box open. There we go, super. So I've had this thing, it turns out, for years, and I've been meaning to put it together for years. So I don't actually know what these things are like. Oh, and it is beautiful. Oh, it is beautiful on every single level. Right down to the fuel baffles on the inside of the... That's actually upside down. That's... Thank you, Tomasz. And yeah, we got the second stage. Fuel baffles again. And... tank separators. What the hell is this? Oh my word! This is like those little Kinder Surprise things. There we go. That I think is virtually all of the command module and service module in there. I mean, this is the amazing thing. The original launch weight of the Saturn V was about 3 kilotons. 3,000 tons, about the weight of, can you see it? I don't think you can see it. I think you need to come around. Actually, no, you might be able to see it. There's a actually you can't. There's a World War II era submarine behind me. They were only about 1,000 tons. The destroyers, the light destroyers, the corvettes that they sent to try and sink them, with about 3 kilotons. It's also 3 kilotons is about the size of the Beirut explosion. Just to put it all into some sort of perspective. Some of this is gorgeous. Okay. Right, so we have lots of pressurization chambers. It has to be said, this is, my God, I've got 2 sets of uplink radar. This is where you really do realise just how bloody insane this thing was, is when you get the Saturn V in a box and you realise just how many bloody engine bells there are on this thing. Okay, so that I think is the F1 engines. These are the J ones that do the second stage. Oh no, that's the top of the service module. Oh my God, fuel pipelines. Right, I think I found them. There we go. Anyway, like I was saying, 3 kilotons went up, and the amount that came down was about 3 tons. Yeah, Matthew, thank you. Yeah, the conspiracy nuts are crazy. In fact, Pothole 54 put up a video today, which I strongly recommend watching, where there are actually there's some nurse who's working in America, and even when these people are dying from the coronavirus, they're still in complete denial about it, that it's all a lie, it's all a hoax, and yeah, and you know, the nurse is sort of saying, look, you know, I can see that your blood oxygen, we're basically feeding you pure oxygen. which is 5 times higher oxygen concentration than when you're breathing at the moment, which is basically the highest concentration of oxygen they can give you. And your blood oxygen is at 70%, whereas it should be 100%. And well, yeah, I mean, it's basically that is the point when you start asking, is there anyone you want to call? And they're still in denial about it, which is just absolutely crazy. I'm not entirely certain this thing comes with an instruction manual. Oh, they got the helix motors. Alright, so it's always a problem once you get into a 0G. The fuel doesn't actually fall that. Once you're in 0G, the fuel just floats around in the tank. So if you want to start an engine, once you've stopped to burn and you're in free fall, there's still 0G in there because all the fuel's falling at the same rate as the canister it's in. You need to basically settle all the propellant to the bottom. So you have these things called Ullage motors that basically fire a bit forwards and give it a bit of gentle forward motion such that all the liquid sinks down to the bottom, and then you can use your fuel pumps to light up your rocket engines, which give you a thrust to get you going. So yeah, that's those things. But there's only one bit I really need in here, and it's none of this. So the majority of rockets, of course, is just giant empty fuel tanks, and they are. One of Elon Musk's recent rockets, it blew up and fell over, and when it landed, it just went completely flat. This is completely expected. These things are giant empty Coke cans. Any rocket that falls over will end up as a pancake. Interesting chat. Right, so let's see what we can do. This is the Lunar module. That is all Lunar module. I am looking for the parts of the command module. I'm not so sure this one actually has the cutaway for the command module. That would be a bit of a shame. I mean, if all I've got on the command module is the top, I need the interior bit. So who's that? TGAM. I've not actually left Prague for over a year, which is super weird. In fact, for the first time, I went out towards the airport, and there are completely new buildings there, which is kind of freaky. I wasn't expecting that at all. And Mike, I hope everyone's well. Second job today, having a pint of wine. That's almost exactly what my brother did, by the way. And he said he felt terrible afterwards, which was kind of crazy that, then he couldn't work out whether he was just feeling really bad because he had a hangover or because it was a reaction to the jab. Yes, the metallic water. That's going to be fascinating stuff. I love building models, but I've got to say this is the big bits are going to be very easy, but I'm not so sure this actually has a cutaway on the service module, which is what I need. Which would suck. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like this guy has an instruction manual. Well, you see, there's the problem. They made lots of the Apollo spacecraft out of clear plastic. Yeah, for a lot of this, you will clearly need the instruction manual. And I'm not seeing the instruction manual. Now, what's this? You have got to be kidding me. I've got to put it all together. There is no instructions. This is not what I expected. It's all very beautiful, don't get me wrong, but there we go. The instructions are concealed on the bottom of the base. There we go. And instantly it tells us. I don't think we've got it. I don't think this does what I wanted to do, which kind of sucks. Which means I'm going to have to put together this thing, which is mind-blowingly more complicated. Yeah, oh, here we go. That's the bit that we're after. Okay. So they were at one point going to put together a model for just the service module. But it looks like on this one, whilst they've got all sorts of cutaways for the Lunar module, they don't have one for the command module. So whilst we've got the size of our 3 astronauts, which is quite nice, it's not going to give us what we want. But it doesn't matter. I think I can show you everything anyway. And yeah. So this is the Dragon version, which requires a degree more sophistication, but it does. These are all landing legs, that's no good. Aha, there we go. So, I can show you what humans are like on this sort of scale. These are humans at 1/72nd scale. Yeah, it's about 100th scale. And those are the 2 oxygen tanks that I was talking about. Those 2 things there. So you could just about put your arms around the outside of the oxygen tanks. And those 2 oxygen tanks powered 3 fuel cells. So they supply all the oxygen for the spacecraft, and they supply all the power for the fuel cells. And the problem is that one of those blew up, and when it blew up, yeah, they do look very much like boobies, but yeah, when one of them blew up, it damaged the other one. And if that had happened on the way back from the moon, everyone would have died within about less than 10 hours. And there's just nothing that you could have done about it. Or even worse, when... Do I have the docked version? I think I do. Let's try this boy. Good. So, this is your Lunar module. So these are on the same scale. Right? So when they were docked, at some point they were going to go down to the lunar surface. You've got to put in your airlock thing here, block it all off, such that you detach the 2 spacecraft. This then has to extend its legs, and this boy goes down to the lunar surface. and it's all done on one single engine. Now, whenever the Apollos had to do one single engine, with one exception, they were all pressure-fed engines. So this was a pressure-fed engine that takes you from the lunar orbit. You fire it in the opposite direction of the way you're going. It slows you down, and eventually, as you're coming down this way, eventually you sort of roll over like this, and there's this bit where all of a sudden, right, so the crew don't actually see where the hell they're going. They're flying entirely on essentially faith and navigation readings, of course. Buy yourself a pint. If you don't drink it, just leave it on the counter. Thank you, John. Anyway, so then you, of course, land this boy, but this is the problem. If the Apollo disaster had happened whilst these guys were on the surface, then the guy in orbit would have lost power completely in about 2 hours, which means that these guys would have been marooned on the moon. I mean, you can take off from the moon and you get into lunar orbit with this thing, which this doesn't actually have the engine bell on it. But the engine bell on this thing was absolutely minuscule. What you got to bear in mind is this thing was all built around 2 men standing up. Okay? Just imagine 2 men standing up there, and this is the entire size of the bit that went down to the lunar surface. And the reason it's got this weird off one closer in than the other, and quite literally 1 step backwards from where these 2 guys were standing is where the ascent engine bell was. Yeah, so this thing weighed, I think, 3 tons, maybe, and it could just about get you into lunar orbit with 2 people who weighed, give or take 100 kilos each. Good God, someone is trying to troll hard in the chat. It makes me wonder. I mean, don't you have like whatever? They're trolling. Let them have their fun. Okay. So yeah, if the oxygen tanks had blown whilst the craft were separated, you would have lost all contact with the service module within an hour, and the guys on the lunar surface. This had its power run from oxygen tanks, hydrogen tanks, and fuel cells. The lunar lander ran entirely on batteries, right? Which are fantastic, but they were very much geared up for how long the mission's going to last, and that was basically it. So unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to put this thing together, sadly. Whilst this is fiendishly far too complicated, and sadly the 4D vision thing doesn't have the fuel cells in it. I've been cheated, but cheers anyway. Isn't the oxygen tank rupturing what caused the Apollo 13 incident? Yeah, but it's one of those bizarre things that in some ways it was a fantastic design, in that what do you need on the spacecraft? You need power, you need oxygen for the people to breathe, and you need water. So a fuel cell does a lot of those things for you. You get oxygen and hydrogen and you react them together, and that gives you voltage, and it also, which you can use for electrical power, and it also generates water, which you can drink. So it did a lot of the things that they wanted, but the downside, of course, is you are entirely reliant on the thing working. So fuel cells, I've actually got some fuel cells here. I might not. Actually, I might be able to get it working. Right, these are fuel cells. Well, more to the point, this does the electrolysis, So you pass electrical current through water and you generate hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen and oxygen then come through to this bit, which is the fuel cell, where they are recombined and they generate a voltage which then should run this motor. And it does have batteries in, which is good, which means that if I connect that there, there is a distinct chance. It's difficult to tell whether these things are working immediately. They should generate, oxygen comes out of here, hydrogen comes out of here. It'll take a little while to come through to this side, but when it does, it'll miraculously start spinning the motor here. Greetings, we get to hear your thoughts on the Porsche e-fuel project at some point. Okay, I've got no idea what the Porsche e-fuel project is, but I can take a look at that. Okay, this is not doing anything at the moment. I might have to check the voltage on the batteries and all that sort of thing. So if you're not passing current through this thing, of course, then you're not generating hydrogen and oxygen. And if you're not generating hydrogen and oxygen, your fuel cell can't do anything. But with the Apollo, the nice thing about the fuel cells was you could pack in a lot of energy. If you're taking your energy in the form of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, all of a sudden, two spheres about this size full of oxygen runs your entire mission going from the Earth to the Moon and back again. Fart says, I recently submitted my dissertation on major disaster in the space shuttle. What are your thoughts on the cause of these crashes? Now, I mean, the main problem was, of course, that with the space shuttle, it had a weird way. Normally, the way rockets are put together is you put the capsule on top. Oh, let me get my redstone. So with the redstone, if anything goes wrong, of course, all you've got to do is basically pull a lever and fire these little rockets here, and your capsule is pulled away from the main rocket, and then all you got to do is open your parachute and you're fine. Now, the space shuttle couldn't do that, of course, because with the space shuttle, oops, there we go. With the space shuttle, it was all built about reusing the engines, right? Reusability. Now that meant that you couldn't have the entire space shuttle sat on top of the rocket stack. It had to be off on the side, which meant that there wasn't really any abort option, which was super weird for NASA, who had always basically, it's an assumption that rockets will blow up. No one has ever cracked the super reliable rocket problem, and the reason is very simple. That the payload capacity to go to low Earth orbit. You take a look at the mass of the rocket when it takes off, and the mass that actually goes into orbit. The mass that actually goes into orbit is pitiful. It's a few percent. So inevitably, all you have to do is you have to shave off some mass of the rocket, and that means that you can put that extra mass into orbit. So very quickly you get to the point where if you make your rockets lighter, they become less reliable. And so there's a balance between these two factors, and that balance between those two factors is it's 99% now. If you take a look at most rockets, they're about 99% efficient, which sounds pretty good until it's a bet your life type situation. And at that point, my fuel cell's not working. I'm very disappointed. Why isn't my fuel cell working? Okay, well, I'll work it out later. But it is absolutely fascinating to watch when it's all in motion, that you just do a little bit of electrolysis here, generate your hydrogen and oxygen, recombine them here, regenerate the voltage, and obviously you lose some on the way, but yeah, better plexus issues. I'm curious, who is the guy? Yeah, whatever. I mean, he's obviously just trolling at this point, but I would ban him, but what's the point? Let him have his fun. Um, yeah, so with the space shuttle, um, that was always the bizarre thing about it. And with the new version, they've got the Artemis, the SLS thing. All that basically is a project to reuse the shuttle engines. You see, the shuttle engines, for all of their vices, were incredibly reliable, very expensive, and you got them recovered at the end, which was nice. But basically, you have all these rocket engines left at the end of the shuttle program. So what they're doing is rather than reusing them on the shuttle, you take four of them and you put them on the bottom of a rocket, and then it's basically a way of getting rid of your old shuttle engines. That's a lot of what the SLS program is. And during this time, whilst they're sort of burning through all of their old shuttle engines, they're planning to work out how to make the shuttle engines cheaper by 3D printing and all that sort of thing. Yeah, so I'm sorry. I wanted to actually get the model done with the fuel with the oxygen tanks on the command module, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So how long have we been going? Is there a timer on this? I'm such a noob when it comes to streaming. So for a long time, actually, I took all this apart, which meant that I couldn't do any hangouts or anything. But curiously, on the screen in the background, I'll show you some research in a second. Was I impressed by SN15? It's not to be scoffed at. I mean, it's not to be overemphasized either. The thing is that it was essentially just a giant flying grain silo with three tiny rocket engines on it. This is a long, long way from something functional. But that being said, to get as well as they did, yeah, I mean, they deserve a tip of the hat to that. I don't see anyone ever landing humans like this, yeah, which is a big part of their spiel. Tankers, maybe. Incidentally, it was interesting to see that SpaceX won the lander mission thing, which at some point I want to do a video on. Again, with the whole Artemis thing, I'm not entirely certain what they're trying to achieve. It's I mean, with the Apollo, it's absolutely amazing what they did, and a lot of the problems that Apollo solved are just as valid today as they were back then. I mean, some of the problems that Apollo had solved, like navigation in space and flight computers, those were brand new problems at the time. Nowadays, they're trivial to solve. Navigation is trivial with modern technology, but keeping people alive, getting them enough oxygen, scrubbing the CO2, these are as big a problems now as they were back in the Apollo era. Any thoughts on the Martian helicopter? They did fantastically. I was skeptic. I mean, I had three tiers to my skepticism on the Mars helicopter. One, could they actually even get it out of the lab? You know, were they confident enough that it would fly on Mars, that it was even worth putting on the mission? And it looks like they solved that. It's not intuitively obvious that it's even possible, that you can actually pack everything on in a light enough configuration that it'll work, or that it's a sensible chance of working. So that was the first big hurdle they had to cross, but that was crossed, you know, even before they launched. The second big hurdle was getting to Mars in a flyable configuration. Anyone who has played with drones knows that they are incredibly prone to small things rendering them unflyable. You know, it's just sort of little bends on one of the flight control surfaces or something, and all of a sudden it won't fly anymore. So you have to get from re-entry to the surface without bumping it at all, which is, you know, this was gateway number 2. Tinkertor says, I appreciate your experience, point of view, tactile analysis. Thank you, much appreciated. And the third one, of course, is what's its longevity on Mars. And yeah, this is where it becomes very clear that the first flights, you're just going to go up, you know, just doing little bunny hops. Because the second this thing lands at a funny angle, it's over. You can't rewrite it. You can't turn it over. There's no, with a drone, you just walk over, flip it over the right way, and you're done. So the original TGAM says, what's the actual mission of the Mars helicopter, scouting and terrain? It was a proof of concept, technological proof of concept, with that kind of as the final goal, that you could maybe fly around and find interesting places for the rover to go. For certain, the Mars helicopter can fly much faster than the rover can drive. Yeah, I forget what the rover's driving capacity is. But incidentally, yeah, this is why I'm skeptical about the whole Artemis mission. In that just sending people to the moon is technically very challenging. Don't get me wrong, I love all of this stuff. But what tends to happen with human type space missions is you spend all of your time just trying to keep the humans alive. And a lot of this can be put into, and we get another super chat comes in. Do you think we make it to Mars without artificial gravity? I don't see us getting to Mars anytime soon. In fact, even the moon is probably doubtful. If you want to go to Mars, you basically need to create the robots that can create a sensible habitat there before anyone leaves Earth. Because otherwise the whole thing will just crash and burn almost instantly. Anyone who goes to Mars, that's basically your life is over. And it will be a pretty unpleasant life, and it will instantly deter anyone else from going. Yeah, there's a certain romance with watching the sunrise on another planet and looking out on another planet, but then you realize that it is an empty, desolate rock, and there's what are you going to do once you're there? And yeah, like I was saying, this is my big problem with a lot of the Artemis stuff. The idea of just going back to the moon and taking humans there to stay, you spend basically all of your time just trying to keep humans alive, which is, okay, it's technically challenging and it's quite interesting and all that sort of thing, but it isn't really, why are you trying to do this? I mean, you could argue that, well, I mean, the moon missions were very much just to get under the Russian skin, which they kind of did. They were a PRQ for Kennedy and all that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it's jolly impressive seeing what they managed to put together. But if you're looking at, wouldn't you actually be better off sending rovers? Yeah, Mars mission is a prime example. To just to keep a human alive, just to keep them breathing in and out, nothing more than that. Humans run at about 100 watts. The entire Curiosity rover runs at about 100 watts. Um, and if you want a human who has power and all that sort of thing, you need to add a zero on that. So you're looking at 10 Mars missions is basically 10 Curiosity missions is kind of what you're looking at to just get a human to Mars, essentially in a giant Coke can. Agreed. Yeah. Once you get people to Mars, what are you trying to do here? I mean, if you're just trying to get people to Mars, yeah, that's what you're going to do when you get there. You basically need to build the infrastructure before you leave, and even at that, it's not going to happen anytime soon. There are just so many technological hurdles to cross. I mean, yeah, and just the cost. I mean, let's just say Elon Musk does perform miracles and basically makes launch costs zero for free. That's still not actually really solving any of the problems that if you send people to Mars, they're basically signing away the rest of their lives. And this idea that Musk is just you got that we're just going to send regular people. You've got to be fucking shitting me, right? You're on a spacecraft which is as light as possible. With these things, a lot of them, the skin was so thin that it had to be. It was designed to be as light as possible. You could sort of stick pins through it if you weren't careful. And you want to put 100 people in a condition like this for 6 months at a time. I mean, all it takes is one guy to go crazy and poke a few holes in the side, and that's the end for everyone. Mars and humans within this century will be successful as the Hyperloop. Yes. I mean, the aspirations, yeah, I can kind of see. Operationally, it's just not going to happen. There are, if you wanted to do it, you add 1 or 2 zeros on the budget of NASA. I mean, it's basically you give NASA the budget of the military. Rough numbers, I think NASA runs on about 20 billion a year. US military, half a trillion, 500 million, 500 billion, that sort of thing. So, I mean, if you were to swap the budgets of NASA and the military for a few years, then you could do it. It's just, it's kind of like the moon missions. Once you actually get there, okay, you successfully went to Mars, you successfully came back again. You might have learned some stuff about Mars, but honestly, the rovers do virtually all of that for you. They're 10 times cheaper than sending people. And yeah, you're almost asking people to commit suicide by going to Mars, which, well, if you can, maybe you can get them back, I don't know. But just the amount of energies that you have to put in. Oh, wow. Wow, looks like someone else has started trolling. Okay, that's nice. Anyway, I think I might call it quits at that. Unless there are any other. Actually, no. Before we go quits, let's take a look at. So this is actually on my work computer at the moment. So if I shrink myself down, you will see behind me there is a giant set of balls. This is tetramethyl ammonium. which is one of the most boring ions that you can possibly imagine. No one would ever sensibly work on tetramethyl ammonium, except me, of course. And your body needs lots of ions to function. The most obvious ones are sodium and potassium. Without the sodium and potassium gradients, your nerve cells don't work, you don't move, you don't think, none of it works. But interestingly enough, on your cell membranes, one of the ions that's on all of your cell membranes, so cell membranes are, there's a hydrophobic lipid tail, and then there is a phosphate and a tetramethylammonium group tied together in a choline, a phosphocholine group no less. And so this ion is basically on all of the membranes in your body. And yeah, tetramethylammonium for the win. But anyway, oh, the copyright fiasco. As far as I know, well, nothing happened about it at all, which I don't know, I was kind of partially surprised by. So, yeah, he wrote me a few threatening emails. His lawyer wrote me a few threatening emails. I put up my video in response. And so the thing that was super weird about that is the complete circumnavigation of the YouTube copyright system. Normally, anyone who wants to protect their copyright on YouTube, that you have options. If you think that someone has taken your work, you can use the YouTube copyright tools to, get the money diverted, the advertising revenue diverted to you, or something like that. It can all be contested at various levels. But you don't have to do that. It's, yeah, we got super chats coming in. Helium-3 on the moon, no. Whilst it's true that, so the surface of the moon gets blasted with solar wind, which contains a significant amount of helium-3, which you can in principle use for fusion. Fusion? Yeah, fusion. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. Can you take unstable molecules? Xenon and chloride. I really don't deal a lot with especially things like xenon. Was it fluoride or chloride? I forget. Anyway, there is, yeah, that one's a little strange even for me, would be working with halides of xenon. Where was I? I've forgotten. Yeah, xenon is awesome. It's got narcotic anesthetic properties, which is another one of these things that no one really understands. There's a lot of these things that when you ask the questions in a determined fashion, the answer is no one really knows. And that's right, it's the copyright. There we go, thanks. I'll come back to the copyright in a second. But if xenon weren't so crazy expensive, if you actually breathe it, it acts as an anesthetic, and no one really understands quite why. It's thought that it dissolves in the cell membrane somehow, and that affects stuff. But yeah, so the thing that was super weird about this guy and his copyright claim is he completely circumnavigates the YouTube copyright systems, which you can do, but this feels now very much like sort of copyright troll territory. This is something that you do if you basically want to threaten legal action against people, which you're entirely within your rights to do. It's just no one does it because the YouTube copyright tools basically keep everyone happy. So the only people who operate outside of that are essentially YouTube copyright trolls. Now, the thing that's even more weird is I actually looked him up, and he's actually not bad as a photographer, right? So I've done a load of these things where I, time lapses of planets and transits and all that sort of thing. And he's actually done some stuff like that that's actually not bad, right? So he has some skill. He's not a talentless bum. And this really does raise the eyebrow as I can't figure out what the hell he was doing, because his actions are basically that of a copyright troll. I mean, if you're just looking at it like that. Um, but yeah, the bottom line is I didn't do anything. So I was waiting with yeah, so grim expectation of having to fight this bloody lawsuit, but it never materialized. So I assume, and the thing is that even when you actually understand the logistics of the game that was being played, it was just dumb on every conceivable level. In that copyright lawsuit like that would be, it would cost, I don't know, $50,000 is just the cost to play. That's basically what you got to pay your lawyers to, yeah, read all the stuff and represent you, and he would have to do that as well. And then you take a look at what are the likely outcomes. Well, the actual damages are going to be modest, if anything. Um, and with things that are marginal, and a lot of the fair use stuff is very grey and opaque. And when these things go to court, it's not quite you roll the dice and you see what comes up, but no one has. I mean, this I got off the copyright lawyers, is no one is going to give you a very good reading of how a case like this is likely to turn out. Um, so, but so for instance, the H3H3 case was a fairly clear fair use case, but they had to pay their court fees, which is, I don't know, some $50,000. He had to pay his court fees, which was some $50,000, and in the end, they H3H3 won. But yeah, that still means that you're out. Yeah, everyone basically loses doing this. There are no winners. So, but occasionally, Martin, if the case that you brought to court is clearly stupid and clearly a waste of everyone's time, then the judge, to try and discourage other people from doing this, can award you the fees of the other guy. So basically, yeah, if I won, they would have had to pay my legal fees. So then they would have been out, $50,000 for that, plus the 50,000 that they had to pay, yeah, for their own legal representation, and it could have likewise go the same in the other direction. So it's just dumb on every conceivable level. But yeah, the thing that really made it stand out was the complete circumnavigation of the whole DMCA and copyright tools on YouTube. That's I've never come across anyone who did that ever before, ever. Um, and yeah, but it looks in the end of the day that nothing came from it. So um, I don't see. Uh, yeah, I think that's done anyway. I was showing you tetramethylammonium, so let's see if I can get some tools up here. We need some representation tools. There you go. So I've got, these are all done from molecular dynamic simulations, by the way, which everything is. So actually, let's make it pretty. Let's make it pretty. Oh, this has got a super messed up structure, but it doesn't matter. Oh, by the way, my next project is lightning. Oh my God, is that guy still trolling? Jesus. determined, I suppose. Christoph says, spell that molecule on chat. Tetramethyl ammonium. This is the problem. I've got so much clutter here now, but I'm going to give it a go. Tetramethyl ammonium. Boom. And the software, by the way, here is called VMD, Visual Molecular Dynamics or something, and it was created by a grant on the US government, and it is one of the most fantastic pieces of software ever. So if I come to graphics and okay, this is not working. Oh. Oh, damn it. There we go. Let's try this. Graphics, representations, display. And let's make it nice and shiny, opaque, glossy. There we go. So it's a nitrogen in the middle there. Ammonium is a nitrogen in the middle with 4 hydrogens around it, and this has methyl groups all around it. And what we're looking at is how water orientates around this molecule, and there's various force fields we got. Yeah. So all of this, we try and work out which one's the best force field by doing comparisons to neutron scattering experiments, which, yeah, smooth shiny balls made everything much more educational. But I ought to, do I actually have a simulation loaded on this? No, I don't, and the hard drive is somewhere else. Damn. Otherwise, I could sort of show you what these things look like in the simulations, because those are fantastic. Yeah, this is the amazing thing, is a lot of this technology comes straight out of the OpenGL physics engines that they have for computer games. Anyway, how long have we been going? I'm for just over an hour by the looks of things. I think I might call it a day there. I'm going to have a one last drink, I think, and then we'll see how it goes. And my God, he's still trolling. Jesus. Okay, dude. Thanks for chatting, Phil. No problem. GC. My eyes, by the way, are terrible. I mean, I've got 2 giant screens here, and yeah, I still struggle. Right. Hey, JR. How you doing? Yep. Yep. Calling it quits there. The metallic hydrogen is going to be absolutely awesome. Looking forward to showing that to you all. It's beautiful, by the way. This is one of the most beautiful scientific things ever. The fact that there's metallic hydrogen is cool. The fact that it's beautiful, it's like a sunrise on LSD. That's the best way I can describe it, quite literally like that. Anyway, thank you for the donation, whoever that was. Good boy. Okay. Have a nice evening, guys. See you next time. Ciao.